What's up, Eager to Pleasers? Welcome back to another episode of the Eager to Please podcast. Today's episode is all about unpacking the hidden connection between high achievement, people pleasing, and burnout. Some of the fundamental pillars of why the Eager to Please podcast was created in the first place. And I'm so excited. Today's guest, Jessica Lattif, founder of Not Working in Tech, who is going to help us explore how corporate culture often rewards self-sacrifice, why so many top performers are conditioned to prioritize everyone else but themselves, and what it takes to finally break the cycle. Jess, thank you so much for joining me. I'm thrilled that you're here.
Thank you for having me, Natalie. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. But before we dive in, I wanted to give a big shout out to our mutual friends over at Fresh Starts Registry, Olivia and Jenny, for making the introduction. They have been huge supporters of the podcast and the conversations that we're having around people pleasing. So I'm just grateful for them to connect us.
Yes. Awesome. Me too. Very, very grateful. Olivia is a huge help for me as well.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So for our listeners meeting you for the first time, could you give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got into consulting?
Absolutely. I started out with my education and background in food and nutrition, actually. Nice. Moved to the Bay Area after graduate school. My partner at the time and I were founded and ran a sustainable seafood business together. And after about a year, we were breaking even and we realized like one of us needed a full-time job to bring in some money, benefits. And at that time, the tech industry was really growing significantly and they were pulling in a lot of talent from other sectors. Mm-hmm. And I had a number of friends in the San Francisco area who were recommending to me, look at jobs in tech. So I did. It seemed like a really stable career pathway and very interesting to me. So I took a 10-week programming course and, learned the basics of full stack programming and the tech jargon that you need to know when you're joining the industry. And then I started looking for jobs in tech. I started out, my first job in tech was as a support representative for a financial technology company that was just a startup at the time.
Okay.
I was the first U.S. employee there to take maternity leave. And I was older than a lot of the other workers. So that was a really interesting experience, kind of isolating. I moved on to work after that at Facebook as an operations manager. I was there for 5 years before it became Meta. Working in AI training when that was still kind of really under the radar. That was 2016 to 2021. And then in 2021, I moved over to Salesforce as an engineering manager. I had really set a goal for myself to get to engineering management because in technology, it's, not only the most kind of held in the highest esteem, but it's highly paid and there's a lot of flexibility. The job was fully remote. At that time, I was going through a divorce and I just really needed the flexibility of not having to go into an office. Mm-hmm. Did that for a few years and that was a difficult work environment. I wasn't trained well. The person that hired me quit 5 days after I started.
Oh my.
And that was sort of a little preview of how things were going to go in that job. A lot of red flags, like right from the beginning. And I had taken leave and felt burnt out over, time to time in the past. But that job really pushed me to the edge. Mm-hmm. And I found myself in mid-2023 sick, like getting sick over and over, not really being able to recover. And I came back from a sort of short notice work trip that I had to plan for my entire department in the span of about 4 weeks and came back to an unexpected performance plan from a formerly trusted peer that had recently become my manager when my previous manager went on maternity leave. And that was sort of the last straw for me, you know, as a manager and somebody that really cares about people. Those kind of conversations where you're sharing that somebody's performance isn't really up to snuff should never be a shock or a surprise, right? People should already know, hey, there's some issues going on with your job performance. And, you know, there was a lot of surprise and betrayal and honestly, just burnout, just straight up so burnt out. And I was really sick. So at that time, I took medical leave to heal from my illnesses and also to try to figure out my burnout and what my next steps were going to be. I took almost a year off of work just to heal. I, you know, told my friends and my family that I was healing from the capitalist patriarchy and needed to figure out my next steps. And at that time, while I wasn't working, I was having a series of conversations with a good friend of mine who you can hear on the first episode of my podcast. And the seeds for not working in tech were born from those conversations where we talked about all of these things that in the corporate technology industry are just not serving people. But also how good it felt to not be working in tech, like especially on leave, you know, keeping your benefits, keeping a portion of your salary. Like we're very lucky in the tech industry and especially in California to have a lot of protections. But recognizing that not everybody feels like they have permission to take that time for themselves. And that was really motivating to me. A friend of mine jokes that the job I've created for myself is now like a private social worker for people in the technology industry because I really aim to help people understand the constellation of benefits that are available to them and to kind of chart a course through some of these really tough moments in their personal and work life where it feels like a crisis. And that's really gratifying to me.
Yeah, that's amazing that you turned something that was not a great experience into something that's more fulfilling. But I want to unpack a couple of things that you said in there because the tech industry almost feels robotic to a sense. I mean, given the name, obviously tech, but I grew up in the public accounting sector, and I feel the same way with any of these bigger corporations where they just take and take and take and take and take as much as you're willing to give. And for people like us who are people pleasers who just want to do a good job and we want to, you know, stamp our name on something that's a good work product and say yes to everything, it's almost like, not that they seek it out, but they thrive on people like us because we're the workhorses. We're going to continue to do the work and burn the midnight oil. And so I don't think we have enough time to realize that we're heading down a burnout path because we're just constantly busy doing all the stuff. So I guess a piggyback question off of that during your tech days, I'm curious how you noticed that the corporate culture environment was taking advantage of people in this situation. What kind of tendencies were you noticing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, I mean, there's different ways you can notice in different environments. Some of the common threads are around just the constant availability, right? We live in this culture now where everyone is always connected, always on your phone, always with your email. If you don't have your corporate email on your personal phone, they'll give you a work phone so that you can always be reachable, right? And as a parent, I had to set limits and say no to things, but I saw that was preventing me from getting ahead in many ways. That the people who said yes to everything were rewarded with more work. It wasn't a reward of simply a promotion or a raise or more equity or whatever. It's like, oh, you did great on this project. I'm going to give you this next huge project, even though you're already running this other thing, and we'll see what more you can handle. And that really came to light for me during what I call the crying lunch, which was with my friend who ended up planting the seeds of not working in tech with me. At that time, we were colleagues, and we had started at Facebook at the same time. And we just sat down for lunch together. It was an afternoon in late 2019. And we just started kind of comparing notes on like, how are you? Like, how are you doing? And she was such a high performer. She was single and lived in San Francisco and had just moved here specifically for the job, right? So she was able to say yes to so many things. And I just saw her, she had this sort of meteoric rise in our organization. Her team grew and grew. They had this huge portfolio of really interesting projects. And I was a parent. I had 2 young kids. I had to say no to stuff. I had a very long commute from Oakland to where our office was. And I felt pretty marginalized in our organization. I saw other people who had started after me getting promoted before me. And I kind of knew that saying no to projects was resulting in me having a reputation of like not being a high performer, right? But during this lunch, what I found was, despite being in these really opposing life positions, we both were feeling the same kind of burnout. Like we both were so exhausted and so demoralized and felt like we couldn't do enough to kind of get ahead or be on top of what our work situation was. And that was super eye-opening to me because you feel like alone, right? You're like, oh, I'm just in this weird marginal place and everybody else is saying yes to all these projects and growing and I have to say no. And how Ashley felt, and she was battling this invisible chronic illness that she didn't want to let on, didn't want to show anybody at work that she was struggling because, that's seen as kind of a sign of weakness. Right. But behind the scenes, her doctors were telling her all of this work stress is making your illness much worse. And she was scared and sad for her health, and so we both kind of, came to tears, and I felt so much compassion for her situation. And she had been a pretty private person, up till that point. I really felt like we were work colleagues. But at that time, something kind of broke down between us and we got much closer as people. And I realized like it didn't matter if you're a high performer or a mediocre performer, if you're single, married, a mom or not a mom, we were all feeling the same level of stress and burnout and fear that, we weren't going to get to the place where we were wanting to be. And that just something clicked in me to realize that it wasn't me. It wasn't us as individuals. It was structural. And there was something systematic happening in these companies they will take everything from you if you let them.
That's right.
And it's not, yes, it's up to the individual to set boundaries and say no, but we need better protections for workers, and we have colleagues and coworkers in other countries where they get to clock out at 5 p.m. and their boss can't email them over the weekend, and it's not like those places don't have successful enterprise. It's not that they don't have entrepreneurs, right? Those places have people living fulfilling, meaningful, well-rounded lives because they have a level playing field to a certain extent that we just don't have here. And so for me, that's one of the more overarching goals of not working in tech is to connect those dots around policies, not just for tech workers, but for all corporate and otherwise workers who deserve and need these kinds of protections. That in some cases, in the tech industry, we're very lucky to have. We do have sick pay and PTO and short-term disability. That was the leave that I took when I was so sick and struggling with my mental health. I got to go on short-term disability, and so that's a very powerful tool that people have to take time away, not blow up your finances or whatever, still be able to live your life and pay for the things that you need to pay for, but just take the time away to reconnect with yourself and your humanity and figure out how to survive, because again, you can't survive like that for that long.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I want to unpack that just for a quick second, because
Sure.
in the history of this podcast, which was one of the reasons why I founded it, was to do a little bit of this deep diving of my personal background, family history, and that kind of thing. I'm wondering, from your experience, what role would you say, like family dynamics or your history or your upbringing or social norms or that type of thing, what impact does that have on shaping us to be that person that just keeps taking this stuff on and doesn't know how to set the boundary until we hit the point of breaking? And so then you're like left to try to pick up the pieces. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
For myself, I see this as stemming from I have a lot of drive to be independent and to be a provider.
Yeah.
So I was the sole breadwinner for my family at that time. My partner at the time was staying home with our kids, which I will say we agreed to early on. I was happy to know that a parent would be home with my kids when they were babies and very young children.
Yeah.
But as time went on, that was too much pressure for me. And even though I did say it, right, I said, please get a job because this is too much for me.
Yeah.
I didn't, like you're saying, I didn't set a boundary. I just said, hey, I'm struggling and I really need help with the financial portion of supporting our family. Mm-hmm. But I still did it. Was doing it all, and as a mom and a birth parent, there's so much that's taken from you. That's what you sign up for when you become a parent. But there's no way to know how much it takes from you and how draining it is until you're going through it.
Exactly.
And, layering work on top of that, I just feel so much personal responsibility. And I think to me that comes from, I had a stable upbringing with family that, was very loving in sort of superficial ways. But below the surface, I didn't get a lot of my emotional needs met from a pretty young age. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, I'm an emotional person. I have a lot of emotional needs. And that wasn't really something that was acceptable in my family. Mm-hmm. And so I needed to look elsewhere. And I knew if I was going to get my needs met, I was going to need to do that.
Yeah.
And so that pushed me to become really hyper independent. And, in terms of people pleasing, there's this element of, to that portion of, I would say, my psychology or my upbringing of kind of knowing that I needed to be a useful provider and this hyper independent person in order to be loved or get my needs met or feel belonging or acceptance. And I mean, on my podcast, and you had mentioned you were listening to my interview with Josh, who's a wonderful therapist, punk rock therapy. He talks a lot about this, about how our families of origin shape our psychology and can kind of be this really big determining factor in how we show up at work and in our careers. And a lot of people who are high performers feel this drive to perform and produce as a way of feeling self-worth and value.
Absolutely. Yeah. I relate to everything you just said.
Yeah.
I want to touch on your consulting piece now, since you were able to kind of break free from, I don't want to call them the change, but they were definitely holding you back from achieving goals that you wanted to achieve and just feeling like you were your true self.
Definitely.
How are you coaching your clients through this, and what are they coming to you asking for help on?
Yeah. So people come to me in these kind of crisis moments when something is going on at work that they don't know what to do, right? I don't call myself a career coach. That's not how I see myself. We have these sort of limited engagements where we'll do, coaching and consulting over the course of maybe a month or two. But my goal is really to empower people with tools and kind of creating roadmaps and connecting them with resources to be able to develop their path. So sometimes I'll refer people out to career coaches or connect them with mental health resources that I have available on my website, or just help them navigate their own benefits packages in the tech world. People will have legal benefits where, a lot of the people I work with, like you, probably are going through a divorce and are parents, and they're stressed about money. And this legal benefit that a lot of tech companies offer gives you a discount on lawyers. And people just don't know what's available to them. And especially when you're in a crisis and you are a high performer that has so much going on, there's like no space to take on an additional task. Yeah. And so I am a person that people can come to and lean on, to where we're doing radical prioritization and saying, what can you drop? What can you put down? But also, let's walk through what you really need in this moment so that I can help connect you with that. Because what you don't need is another task list of 15 emails to send and 3 phone calls to make and the voicemails to leave and the follow-ups, right? Like, that's too much for people when they're in this crisis moment.
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe they're in a performance management situation like I was, or they've just gone through a reorg and they've lost their manager of many years that took a lot of work building a relationship. And now they're with somebody new that doesn't like see their work or get them as a person. Just these sort of short, intense bouts of coaching people through a crisis, so where they come out with a clear plan and some next steps on how they're going to support themselves through this and how to get through that burnout, not to go back, because we can't go back, right? You can't go back to your pre-burnout stage. Right. You have to make a plan for how you're not going to do that to yourself again.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some of the things that you suggest people look out for before they get to the stage of burnout? Because it can happen, I don't know, in varying degrees of severity, if that's what you want to call it. Because you're feeling overwhelmed, but then this next thing really pushed me over the edge.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I really like to do with people is to take kind of an inventory of all of the things that they love about themselves and the things that make them feel the most human, and look at where in their lives they're able to connect with that stuff and where they can incorporate it, and where in their lives they've dropped that for themselves, right? Where you're, like you said, you're deprioritizing yourself to the extreme because you do have, we have so many responsibilities, especially as moms, especially as, women at work. We're dealing with an extra kind of added complicated layer of, not just being good at our job, but also kind of having to question, like, do they see me? Am I doing too much? Did that sound bitchy or whatever? Like, there's so much more going on that we forget. Like, maybe it's just connecting with nature, or I really love singing, or getting in the water. Like, for me, that's what I had to do for myself in a time when I was really burnt out. This was pre-2023, but a different moment when I was really experiencing burnout when I was still married. And I kind of did this inventory of like, what are the things that make me me that I'm missing right now? And how can I include those in even just in little ways to bring myself the relief of being human again? Yeah. And being able to show up for my kids or myself or my friends or my job with a smile. The other thing I would tell people to look out for is feeling irritable. That's a clear sign that you're overwhelmed, right? When you're irritable, you're snapping at everybody. It's because you're operating from a place of an activated nervous system. Yeah. You're feeling threatened. On a base level, right? There's a threat that's coming at me. So I'm going to be nasty to shut that threat down. But like our friends, our kids, our spouses, they're not trying to be a threat, right? So noticing when we're treating sort of these basic interactions, especially from kids, as a threat and snapping at them or being really irritable. To me, that serves as a like a warning light. Something's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. What else would you say would be helpful in order to break the cycle of, I don't want to just call it people pleasing, because I feel like there's a lot more to the burnout cycle than just people pleasing. I feel like it's complicated.
It is. There's
There's a lot of different layers in there
absolutely
that contribute to the burnout. But what are some things that you can do to break out of that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with reprioritizing, right? This radical reprioritization of what is important to you in life and how can you center those things that are about you. I think for a lot of us, it feels really selfish.
Yes.
To be like, oh, well, I'm going to do a singing group every week instead of like having dinner with my family. But you know what? Like, your family will be there. Yes, they need you, but they need the best version of you. And kids need to see that their parents are human beings and not just like these robots that are serving them food and driving them places, and that it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially a lot of women, to take that time for ourselves and be like, hey, I love you guys and peace out. I'm going to go do this thing that brings me a ton of joy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's really hard for people. And I get it. I also was that person. But whatever it is, it's really about taking stock and taking inventory. What have you let go that brings you the most connection to yourself and your humanity? And how can you recenter that in your life? What can you say no to? What can you offload to your partner or outsource or ask more of the kids? I mean, our kids, all things considered, it's a stressful life for kids, but they don't do that much. So like they could do more, right? They could empty the dishwasher, they could sort their laundry, they can clear the table and help with dinner. They need to be doing those things, because otherwise then, suddenly you have these very capable, competent teenagers who don't lift a finger.
Yes.
And that certainly contributes to your own burnout and the feeling of being put upon. Everyone needs something from me. But it's important to examine our role in that and say, where am I over functioning and making things too easy for everyone else?
Yes.
It's not, it's not on us to overperform so that other people can underperform. And that is uncomfortable, to be like, I'm not going to make dinner tonight. And if we all eat cereal, go for it. You pour yourself a bowl of cereal and there's 3 kinds of milk in the fridge,
I seriously, Jess, I love everything you just said, because I do that. In fact, I just had this conversation with my mom recently, who said, you need to stop making your 16-year-old breakfast. She's totally capable. Again, because I'm like, why do I feel that I don't want to put her out? Because she asked me, oh my gosh, my baby who's 16, like she asked me, and of course I want her to need me still, but it's like, you're so right. She needs to be able to be independent, and she can certainly make her own breakfast. So
yeah. And I think, it's the tough thing is being able to make the time outside of those moments where you're like, why can't you make your own breakfast? What am I doing? Take the time when you're all calm and you're just relaxing on the weekend to say, hey, I need to have a talk with you. I've been feeling really overwhelmed lately and it's taking a toll on me. And one of the things that could really help with this is if you start taking responsibility for your breakfast. So let's talk now and think about what groceries do you need? What foods do you want to eat? What's easy for you to make in the mornings and quick, so that in the moment, it's not going to be up to me. And I really think that's going to help a lot with my grumpy moods in the morning. Because kids, they respond well when you bring them along in that journey.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work to bring them along in the moments when you're like already freaking out and so stressed.
Yes. So true. So true. Okay. Yeah. So in your experience personally, or in what you're seeing in some of your clients, why do we have a hard time setting boundaries and enforcing those with people? I mean, especially with people we love, because of course you want to help the people in your inner circle, but even more so, I feel like people in the outer circles too, because you want to put forward a good face to the world. So
yeah, I mean, this is a very complicated question with so many different facets to the answer. Number one, I would say there's a tremendous drive for humans to feel belonging.
yeah.
Right? We all need that. It's one of our deepest needs as humans is to feel we belong.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is wrapped up in our family systems where most people, I would say, if your family has demonstrated loving boundaries and made you feel belonging from the very start, like you have a generational wealth that is untouchable by almost any other measure, right? Most people's families, if you're American and your parents are, from generations like boomers or before, or even maybe Gen X, like most people we're not aware of healthy boundaries. And that wasn't really a thing until recently, right? Everybody just sacrificed and sacrificed.
Yeah.
There's this idea of like the mother as the martyr and gave up her dreams. And that's a very popular trope to the extent that we all kind of have internalized that.
Mm-hmm.
And whether we choose it or not, those tropes guide our thoughts and our actions. And then on a systematic level, like on a more broader societal level, kids are not taught to set boundaries for themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in school, you can't say no, right? Like you don't get to say, I don't want to go to gym class today,
Right. Right.
or I don't like sitting next to this person, right? There's ways in which kids are really trained to like accept a lot of situations, environments, tasks that don't feel good to them, that would not be their choice, and they just kind of have to grin and bear it or drag their feet and bear it. And I'm not saying that there's not something good to that, but there isn't a balance very much for children.
Yep.
Right? And so we're conditioned at a really young age by our entire society to kind of just accept like life is this thing where like I dread going to school every day and I have fights with these people at school that never leave me alone, and my teacher makes me do this annoying assignment, and that just sort of can hang on and be something that leads you and stays with you in your career, right? I noticed a lot of times, especially in my last tech job, I felt so much dread about going to work every day. And I just kind of accepted that was normal. And like, that's not okay. Like, you shouldn't be feeling like emotionally and physically sick about your job.
100%. Yes.
And then when I left work and I started doing some creative projects here and there, I noticed like I was having a meeting for this little podcast for kids that I was working on as a starter project. And I was kind of dreading it because I just had associated work with dread. And this was work, right? And then I went to the meeting and it was so awesome. It was creative and I got to say my preferences, and nobody was like, oh, Jess and her crazy identity politics. It was like, oh, cool. Yeah, let's make a character gender neutral. Or, like I came out of that and I was like, oh my God, like I don't have to dread work. And it was kind of a revelation, but it shouldn't have to be, right? Like we can love our jobs. But part of that, again, is societal and systemic. If we don't have sick pay, you're going to dread work because if I'm sick, I can't say no. I just have to go so I could get paid, right? Some of this stuff is things that we can push for on a broader societal level to change policy and be a better support for boundaries for workers.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about your company, Not Working in Tech. And so say I'm a new client of yours, what could I expect from signing on?
Yeah. So I do either weekly or bi-weekly one-on-one, like hour-long one-on-one sessions with people where I try to really learn from you, my client, what's going on for you right now? Like, who are you at your core? What makes you human? What brings you joy? Like, what makes you feel the most alive?
Mm-hmm.
And like, where did you lose that? When, like, pinpoint the times when you just let those things kind of fall to the wayside. And for some people, maybe it's more recent. For other people, it's like, I don't remember doing any of those things since I became an adult.
Yeah.
But there's no shame in admitting it, right? That the first step is kind of having this clear look at your life and building this 360-degree picture of where are all the demands in your life coming from? What are all the things you have to do and all of your priorities? What are all the things that make you feel human and bring you joy? And then kind of taking that into a matrix and looking at, number one, where can we drop some things?
Yeah.
Like I was saying, like, where can we hand some things off or just say no? And the same thing with your job, right? What are all the demands and all the things I'm doing and all the things I'm saying yes to all the time? And like, what's some things we can say no to? And that's scary for people. And it's, it is scary. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that and say, this isn't going to be an easy process. It's hard. It is hard for people to practice this new thing of saying no, and to practice centering themselves. So we'll come out of that first conversation with, ideally like this 360-degree view of what's going on in your life. And, some little things to think about in between then and the next conversation of when we're going to really start making some steps, some to-dos, some changes. Yeah. And have like some homework of like, say no to this thing, figure out how you're going to include this thing in your life. Make some time, lean on your friends, ask, does somebody want to be my accountability buddy and go for a hike with me once a week? Yeah. Whatever those things are, like start practicing centering yourself and your own needs and the things that make you feel more connected. And then we also, again, like it's a 360-degree view, but I want to really focus on work with people. And what can we do in work? For some people, it's connecting with a career coach and figuring out, am I really wanting to be in this career, in this job, or do I need to kind of chart a course someplace else? Mm-hmm. For some people, it's, I really want to stay in this job, but this thing isn't working for me. And so in that case, it's more around looking at all the resources that are available to you. Do you have a therapist? Do you want a therapist? Because let's get you into therapy. If you're already in therapy, amazing, great. Let's talk about you setting goals with your therapist that can allow you the space to grow emotionally and mentally to where you want to be. Mm-hmm. And then in your work, let's look at that really difficult, tricky situation and say, what are some of the things that you can start doing? Maybe it's you start reporting out and documenting the things that your team is doing, and uplifting them at the end of the week with your leadership team, or, just kind of creating these new vehicles for people to uplift themselves, uplift those around them, but also shift in ways that are going to feel good to them.
Yeah.
And, ideally after 4 sessions, people feel that they've gotten some of the tools they need to recover. Yeah. Maybe they've decided to take some leave. And in that case, I offer workshops, nice. For like different cohorts of folks, neurodivergent folks in tech, or people who are on leave, or parents coming back from parental leave. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I have a cohort that those people can join to get support from other people in their same situation. Or maybe together we design a set of accommodations that they're going to ask for from HR or from their manager to say, hey, this is how I need to feel supported. And that's a really scary thing in tech right now. There's just so many layoffs, and there's a lot of, I will just say, messed up things happening from the corporations to their workers. Yeah. But I just think it's so important that people not let that kind of have a chilling effect on speaking up and saying what they really need. Because if we don't set a line, if we don't draw the boundary and say what we need, these things are going to keep happening.
Sure.
You know, I just saw right now there's a lawsuit against Meta from folks who are claiming that they were targeted for being on disability or having accommodations or being on leave during their layoffs. And that's a powerful tool. You know, we need to be able to keep standing up and saying it's not right to target people who are parents or people who are disabled or, you know, need accommodations. And so I just would say for people, you know, I'm a big proponent of taking your fucking leave. Like, take your leave. If you're burnt out, if you're worried that your burnout is affecting your job performance, especially, you know, it's really important to take leave and heal, and not to live in fear of losing your job, because it's happening anyway.
So true. So do you see clients outside of California?
Yes, I do. But I would say the majority of folks are in California because of the tech companies being kind of centered here. And my network is very California specific.
Yeah. Okay.
I also have the most expertise around the policies for like leave and disability in the state of California. But I'm so interested in that stuff. So I get kind of excited about like doing the research and looking into it for people on their behalf, because I know that that's something that they don't have the bandwidth to take it on.
Yeah. And like you said, it's scary, especially when you're speaking up for yourself and you're nervous. Like if I say, hey, I feel like I'm being underpaid, or I feel like this is too much for me, they're just going to find the next person who's going to do it for cheaper. It's interesting because I'm not in tech, but I feel like I had a very similar situation when I was getting back into the workforce after taking off for 12 years to raise my kids because I wanted to be at home with them.
Yeah.
And I almost felt like aged out or like inferior to some of these younger accountants coming into the system because they're fresher and they're more up on their tech skills and they're whatever, AI this and whatever. And I'm like,
yeah, they can say yes to everything because they don't have as many responsibilities outside of work.
Yes. And so I'm like, am I being age discriminated against? This is ridiculous. I literally felt so crappy about myself because, you know, I'm an educated person, but I just felt so shitty. So yeah. It's interesting. I find this also fascinating. So thank you for talking about it with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Did I leave anything out that you kind of want to touch on that you would like to share?
I mean, for me, what brings me the most joy with my clients is finding ways to help people feel better.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm really excited about in the future is designing retreats for people specific to their position, like retreats for moms in tech or retreats for people who are neurodivergent, to really heal from those specific types of burnout and people-pleasing tendencies that arise for particular groups, right? Mm-hmm. Like for folks who are neurodiverse, they also have a really complicated set of life circumstances that they're trying to navigate. Yeah. And you can feel so worried. Like I have ADHD, I'm raising a son with autism. You know, there's this level of masking that you're constantly doing. Yeah. And not just trying to be great at your job, but also being like, did I come across too direct in that email? Or does my leadership team think I'm like so weird because I said this weird detailed thing that was like a rabbit hole that I went down, you know? And so I'm excited to work with different groups of people who might be struggling either in the tech industry or in other industries to help folks heal from burnout in this deeper way where they're connecting with nature, connecting with other, practitioners who are helping people to be really in their body and notice, their nervous system signals of getting activated or overstressed. Yeah. And coming away with not just a wonderful long weekend and new friends, but also hopefully new tools to help them find more balance and peace in their lives.
I love that. Oh, that is a great story.
Thank you.
Where can people find you if they want to connect, either on Instagram or your website?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Not Working in Tech. I'm on TikTok at Not Working in Tech. I'm kind of just getting started on those platforms. And then I also have a website, notworkingintech.com.
And your podcast.
And yes, and my podcast, of course, Not Working in Tech Podcasts, which you can find on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the places where you get podcasts. I will say, too, on my website, we have a ton of resources for mental health and burnout. We have a lot of recommendations for books people can read, other folks they can follow on social media who are in this space.
Nice.
Because I really care about uplifting folks that are doing great work in this space. You know, none of us can do any of it alone. I'm only one piece of a constellation of support that is out there for people that people deserve to find and to get for themselves.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, Jess. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here,
you.
for sharing your story. It's very uplifting. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate that.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.